Welcome back to chillTV's special series, The Calm in the Storm. In episode 1, we spoke to people's typical reactions in the first stages of a crisis. Today we're going to address the question, do you think we'll ever shake hands again? As a metaphor for, will the world be recognizable as it once was? With me is Kim Self, who helped us navigate through the first stages last time. Welcome back, Kim.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Okay, here's the question then. Do you think we'll ever shake hands again?
Well, I hope we will, but who knows? And I expect at some point we're going to get past some of this. But what motivated that question, and the reason we even titled this podcast that way, is early on in the epidemic, my neighbor and I we had a couple of free days because everybody did. We weren't working, and we were out planting some seed in our front yard, some grass seed. And he leaned on his shovel and he just looked out over the horizon because we live on a hill, and he said, "Do you think we'll ever shake hands again?" And what he was asking is exactly what you mentioned in the introduction. Is the world ever going to get recognizable again? He didn't care about shaking hands. He was just wondering if the world is ever going to get back to a way that he's familiar with. And not only with the pandemic, but with a lot of the cultural changes that have happened since then and just the last few weeks, a lot of people are asking that. And there are a lot of people who are getting overwhelmed by change itself. And we start to ask ourselves, is this going to be the way it is forever? Are we always going to be just this cork bobbing around in the ocean and nothing is going to be recognizable as we know it? And it's an important question. And the answer is there is a way you can know where you are in the storm. So Barris, let me introduce you to 5 friends of mine. Friend number 1 has just lost his wife. They were married for 45 years, and he has to adapt to life without his partner of 4.5 decades. Person number 2 woke up to find herself in a worldwide pandemic. Her job has changed. She has nowhere to go. She's supposed to stay in the house. She's stuck with her kids, can't do anything with the kids. Her husband is there. She can't go shopping. Every facet of her life has been affected, and she doesn't know how long that's going to last, and she doesn't really know what any of it means. Person number 3 has decided that they're going to change the way they think about race, culture, and society. And not only change the way they think about it, but that they're going to change the way they behave, the way they act in this society. Person number 4 has just been reassigned in her company. Her company has been gutted. She has to fill 3 functions now, and her new function is going to have to include some of the technical side of things in an area that she has no training in, and it's all highly skilled and all highly technical, and she's going to have a big learning curve. And then person number 5 is just decided that they want to become fluent in Spanish. They're going to learn a new language. Now, when you think about the death of a spouse, a really critical job change, a shift in the way you relate to the society around you, and somebody who just wants to learn Spanish, it seems like those are all different discussions, but they're not. Because every one of those people in each of those situations is going to follow the same arc, the same curve as they adapt to what their new desired outcome is going to be. They'll have different tests, they'll have to do different things. The change will wear a different face and different apparel, but the spine of that change is all going to be the same. And what I want to share with you today is a simple tool that I've shared with lots of organizations over the last 30 years. And it's one of those things that I don't just teach, I actually use it. There are probably 10 to 12 times a year that I bring this out and I just try to figure out where I am in my life or in change or when I'm facing a challenge. And what it is an acrostic that's called carrots. Yep, it's an acrostic that comes from the garden, and it's CARROTS. And each of those letters corresponds to one of the 7 stages of adaptation to change. And if you can find a goofy enough name like carrots, there's a real good possibility that you'll be able to remember it when you need it. So that's what we're going to be talking about.
I prefer that to stick. I can assure you that much.
You like it better than stick?
I do.
Okay.
So why don't we get to what carrots actually stands for?
Okay, the first letter, C. C stands for confusion. If you think back to the first time you heard about COVID, You didn't even know how to spell it. You didn't know what it was. You just heard some rumor about something, but it kept being persistent. It was always coming back. You always kept hearing it, and you hear more and more and more. And as you heard more and more, you started to develop an anxiety over what this all meant. That's the second letter, C-A. A stands for anxiety. Anxiety is not always a bad thing. Anxiety is simply our body's way of telling us there's something that needs paying attention to. There's an issue here. It could be a threat. It could just be a need for us to change something. But anxiety will then turn into angst if we don't know how to control it. And as a change develops and as a challenge grows, what motivates us is when the angst, which is simply existential dread, causes us to want to make a change. We have to act on this. It tells us that this is not something we could ignore. This is not going away. We are in this, and now we have to decide what to do about it. And it's this moment of angst that we really decide which way we're going to go. It's a choice point. It's a signpost. Because one way that we go will lead us out into the sunlight. We're going to change, we're going to evolve, we're going to succeed, we'll make it through. But there is another way that we can go that leads us just back into the cave, and that is if we let our angst turn into anger, because anger will just cave us in. It's one of those things that makes us just want to hide. It takes us back instead of forward. We get mad, we resent. Nobody really likes having their life changed, but we start to resent everything about this. We don't want to wear a mask. We don't want to have any lines around us. And instead of trying to figure out how to adapt to that, we just start resisting. We start fighting it. And under stress, what we will do as human beings is we'll go back to our comfort zones. It's where we revert to. You remember Mike Tyson one time said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Well, it's this moment of angst and stress and anger that we really need to make a choice. Because if you think about it, we used to believe that the world ran off of fight and flight. But there's really a third element to that, freeze. Because if all you have is fight and flight, you could make about a 50%, there's about a 50% chance you're going to make the wrong choice. If you stop for a minute, just freeze and survey the situation, it could help you from flying off the side of a mountain, or it could keep you from trying to fight a grizzly bear. Just blind reaction of fight or flight doesn't give you a chance to reconnoiter the situation, to analyze, and just look around you to see what's going on. But the temptation for a lot of us is to get stuck in that freeze mode. We just stay frozen. And what we say is, I don't care if the world is changing around me. I'm going to keep making carriage wheels even though the world is driving automobiles. So that's the choice point. Let's hope you don't go to anger and freeze and just make carriage wheels. Because if you will go with this, if you will pay attention, given a little bit of time, and once you've had a little chance to get some history with this, you're going to go into the third stage, and that is recognition of patterns. You're going to start to see some patterns emerge. You're going to it's sort of like the old figure ground thing when you were a kid. You would look at these optical illusions and you would see the figures that come out of the dots. Sometimes it's done to test depth perception, sometimes it's color perception, but we'll start to see figure ground photos and we can identify patterns. Well, change and crisis does the same thing. After a while, you start to recognize this is what shopping means. This is what life means. This is what working from home means. Even more, you start to understand what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean you've mastered it. It just means it's not so scary anymore. And when things stop being so scary, we start to get a little bit more control. And when we start to have a little bit more control over our lives, that's when the anxiety starts to serve its purpose and can start to back off just a little bit. Now, once we start to recognize patterns and we work through a few of those patterns and we try to latch onto them and we develop some history with them, we come into the fourth stage of change, and that is resolution. Now, resolution means we've taken some of those patterns, some of those things we've noticed that have some commonality to them, and we've tried to incorporate them into our lives, and we've tested them, retested, maybe jettisoned a few, maybe strengthened a few, maybe had to learn a few lessons along the way on how to get better at them, but we're starting to resolve. We're getting some resolution here about here's the way forward for me. And Barris, you and I were talking about for the program Chilliwack Tonight. When that first started, there was a lot of experimentation. You were sort of shooting from the hip, not really knowing exactly what to do with it. But over time, you've come to some decisions, haven't you? Talk about that a little bit, will you?
Yeah, no, happy to. I mean, I guess I would even back it up a little bit and say, when the pandemic additionally hit, we looked at what we were doing with chillTV and said, well, everything's changed now. Our business model has been affected, and what are we going to do? And you get angry a little bit, or the anxiety was certainly there. And then finally, we kind of looked at it and thought, maybe we can take this in a different direction and create a new path. So we started the show Chilliwack Tonight as a result of the being a pandemic. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have a show called Chilliwack Tonight. And that's just a late night talk show, but even that has evolved as we try different things, from a late night talk show to adding some fictional elements into it and a story arc that lasts a number of months. So it's constant evolution, but I think there's some good opportunities that present themselves when you're able to kind of do that. I think is that what you're looking?
Well, two things came out in what you just said. Opportunity and optimism. And you just took us to the next stage of growth, because CARRO, optimism. Because when you start to have some resolution, you start to look forward to things. You're not defeated anymore. You're not held hostage to things that you don't understand. You've started to resolve the path forward. And one of the key decisions, one of the most powerful things you can do to help you adapt to new circumstances, is to redefine the way you look at change. Instead of asking yourself, what is this change taking away from me? What is this stealing from me? What is this removing from my life that I value? Redefine that and ask, what opportunities is this going to make available to me? What does this help me do? A lot of businesses around Chilliwack have asked that, and some of them were real early adopters. They looked at the change, they looked at the requirements, and they just flipped their business on a dime. Harvest Cafe down on Mill Street, very early on, when they shut down the cafe for seating, for in-house dining, they turned it into a bread making company. I mean, they just started making artisan breads. Decades Coffee Club started making frozen desserts that you could take home. Cultivate Cafe started making whole meals that you could take home. Couldn't do them there, but they spun their business and started making take-home dinners. I know at our business, Aromatica Fine Teas, we had to move away from a place where normally everybody smells the tea and tastes the tea, and we had to develop a whole online presence that was much bigger than we ever had it before. So instead of saying, what does this take away from me, we start asking, what does this make available? During World War II, Dr. Viktor Frankl, was a very famous psychiatrist, was put into one of the concentration camps. And he discovered that the people who survived those horrible ordeals were not the biggest or the strongest or the smartest or the fastest. They were the ones that developed a reason to live. They developed some optimism and said, I'm going to live through this. I'm going to tell this story. I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen again. And what it's going to take for us to make it through is we recognize these things that we've resolved. When we see the patterns, we resolve them. We now move forward with optimism. That takes us to the next stage, T, which is Thanksgiving. We start to be grateful, and we start to act on this gratitude and the momentum that we're building forward. And that's one of the most powerful things we can do. To move from this transition of I don't know if I can to I know I can is a really powerful place to be. And that just slides us right into the final stage, the seventh stage, and that is sharing. If you want to know when you're coming out of a change, when you've adapted, when you've done all the work that's necessary, watch when you start sharing, because when we overcome, there's just something in us people that we want to tell people about it. We want to say, here's how I did this, here's how you can do it too. And it's a really, really powerful place to be. So again, what we're looking at here is not so much a magic formula that solves all your problems, but what Carrots does is it tells you where you are. Rather than being lost in this planet that we don't know anything about, I can look at where I am in this situation. Am I starting to recognize patterns? Am I coming to some resolution? Am I developing any kind of optimism here because I feel a little bit more empowered? And it doesn't answer all your questions, but it just helps you know where you are on the continuum from confusion to sharing. And that's a really powerful place to be.
Well, that's a lot of material to take in.
Yep, I
So,
know.
anything else that you can share with us for episode 2?
Well, just a reminder, as I said, it's simple, but that doesn't mean it's simplistic. And so there are about 4 caveats I'd like to make. Remember, the map is not the territory. What I've given here is a high terrain map. If you know a terrain map or a topographical map, it doesn't always show you the roads. That's what we're going to do in the next podcast. The next podcast will tell you what roads we can take to get us through here. But right now, we just want to know, what does the terrain look like and where are we on this planet? Years ago, I had a postcard that had a picture of the Milky Way, and there was an arrow pointing to this infinitesimal dot, little planet Earth, and it said, "You are here." And every now and then, I would actually pull that out, and it was a good reminder, okay, that's where I am. And the map is not the territory, as Lord Alfred Korzybski said. And what he meant by that is, just because you have a representation doesn't answer all the questions. I've got a GPS watch, and one of the things that comes with it is a perpetual update guarantee, because every year the roads keep changing. And as you move through change, you're going to see that, yes, Seattle is always going to be south of Vancouver, but there may be some changes in the routes that you take to get there. So be prepared for that. Caveat number 2 is that change is a process, not a destination. You're not going to do this one time. It is something we have to get good at. Number 3, there is no new reality. I keep hearing people talk about what it's going to be like when we reach the new normal or the new reality. Well, if you think about it, years ago, Robert Anton Wilson came up with a no normal society, because normal is by itself a mathematical, a statistical mean. It's an average. No single human can ever be that mean. We're all different. Average and normal is different for all of us. So don't try to measure it by what somebody else is doing. Just fit where you are along the way. And the last caveat is, we better get good at this. I mean, change is it's just going to get faster and faster and faster. We need to develop this skill. After all, we are a species that builds square houses on a globe. So there's always going to be something out of square. So we can do this.
Well, that was wonderful, Kim. Okay, and that was episode 2 in chillTV's special series, The Calm in the Storm. Watch out for episode 3. You can get there from here, only on chillTV.